Tonight's story takes us back to the wild frontier, where survival meant more than a strong arm or a fast horse. It meant choices, hard choices, that could shape the fate of entire peoples. This is a tale of Jeb Callahan, a lone rancher who opened his door to a starving child, and in doing so, stepped onto a road that would test every ounce of his courage. Before we begin, write into the comments the name of the city you're watching from, and don't forget to leave your thoughts at the end. Now, let's begin the story. The desert was breathing heavy that morning, as if the whole land had lungs full of dust. The sun hammered down on Sagebrush Valley, where I'd lived most of my 35 years, and the wind tugged at the broken fence post I was trying to set straight. My name is Jeb Callahan, cattle rider, ranch hand, survivor of more dry seasons than I care to count. I thought the worst I'd faced that day was another busted rail, and maybe a rattlesnake under the trough. But the desert has a way of dealing cards you never asked to play. It started with a stumble, light, uneven steps that didn't belong to any steer or wolf or horse I knew. Dusty, my old bay mare, lifted her head and froze. Her ears flattened back, like she was listening to something I couldn't yet hear. I set down the hammer, narrowed my eyes toward the creek bed. That's when I saw the figure. Small, fragile, weaving like a candle flame in the wind. At first, I thought it was a stray goat or a starving coyote. But then it fell, knees hitting sand, hands like claws trying to drag forward. And in that collapse, I saw the truth, a child. I hurried closer, but slowed before reaching. In these lands, a sudden move can spark panic. I walk with my hands open, voice low. Easy there, little one. Easy. The child lifted its head, and the sight made my chest clench. Eyes black as obsidian, wide with fear and hunger. Lips cracked and bleeding. Clothes torn but unmistakable. Woven garments, dyed in patterns I'd only glimpsed from afar at trading posts. Native, not just any tribe either. The stitching, the color, it spoke of red mesa. And I'd heard enough around saloons to know their chief, Iron Elk, was not a man to cross. The child whispered something, syllables I couldn't understand, but the meaning was plain. His small hand lifted weakly toward the canteen at my side. Thirst. I uncorked it and held it steady. He drank as if the world was slipping through his fingers, gulping until I pulled it back. His skin burned under my palm when I touched his shoulder, fevered from exhaustion. Around his neck hung a small leather pouch, frayed at the seam. On the cover was etched a flaming bird, wings spread wide. I had seen that design once before, painted on a war drum carried through town by a trader who left everyone uneasy. It wasn't decoration. It was a marker of bloodline. The boy tried to stand, legs trembling like reeds. I scooped him up. He weighed no more than a sack of grain, light enough to remind me of every loss I'd carried on this land. Dusty shifted but steadied herself as I swung him across the saddle. Easy, girl, I murmured, patting her neck. We'll get him to shade. And with that, we rode back toward my cabin, the desert stretching behind us like a stage curtain about to fall. Inside, I set him near the stove, threw kindling into the firebox, and ladled what stew was left from last night, beans, a scrap of salt pork, a touch of pepper. The smell drifted, and his eyes followed every movement of the spoon. I tore off half a cornbread loaf, dipped it, blew it cool, placed it in his hands. He devoured it, silent, desperate, watching him eat. I thought of my kid brother, lost years ago to a flash flood while I wasted minutes on an argument about nothing. Maybe that's why I didn't hesitate this time. Maybe kindness isn't virtue. It's memory clawing for a chance to mend itself. When the boy's head drooped and his eyelid sank, I saw the leather pouch slip loose. Its core was nearly torn through. Without thinking, I pulled a strip of twine from my kit and tied it snug, a knot firm enough to hold against any storm. A small thing, but the desert teaches you that sometimes it's the smallest knots that keep whole lives from unraveling. I didn't know it yet, but that knot would tighten around more than the pouch. It would tighten around the fate of every soul on my land. I stepped onto the porch, letting the night settle. The horizon was a sheet of copper fading to black. At first, I thought the haze there was heat rising from rock, but it was too low, too steady. Dust, a line of it, moving slow, deliberate. I stilled my breath and listened. No cattle herd moves that even. And then it came, the faint echo of drums. Not the clumsy beat of drunken miners in town, but deep, rhythmic, purposeful. War drums. My blood cooled. Somewhere beyond that horizon, riders were coming. And they weren't coming for cattle. Behind me, through the cracked door, the boy stirred, clutching the pouch I had just mended. His chest rose and fell shallow but steady. I looked out again toward the dust clouds swelling under the dying sun, and I knew one thing with certainty. This was only the beginning. Night didn't fall so much as it slid over the land, like a blade returning to its sheath. The drums kept time with my pulse. Slow, measured, too steady to be anything but intent. I doused the lamp, left the stove to a low ember, and eased the window curtain with 2 fingers. Out beyond the cottonwoods, the dust line had widened into a gray veil. You don't need to see riders to know riders are there. The desert tells you in the way coyotes go quiet and grasshoppers stop arguing with the dark. Inside, the boy slept in the chair with his knees pulled tight, the leather pouch clutched to his chest. I set the Winchester back on its hooks. A rifle in my hands might buy me seconds, but it would sell me the rest of my life, and his at a discount. If you plan to talk, you talk empty-handed. If you plan to beg, you beg while standing tall. That's a rule out here, just like boiling water twice when the creek runs low. I stepped onto the porch. The moon was a thin coin, not rich enough to pay for miracle, but enough to show me shapes blooming along the ridge. Horses cresting the rise, riders seated proud and still. They fanned into a half circle without a shout or a wasted turn, the way only men who've trained together since boyhood can move. Feathers and braids caught moonlight. Lances shivered with little stars at their tips. One rider eased forward, not fast, not threatening, simply inevitable. He wore a buffalo robe with a thunderhead stitched across the back, and a single gray stripe ran through his hair like frost on basalt. His gaze swept the porch and came to rest on me, as if he'd known me all my life and had never once been surprised. "White man," he said, the English careful, each word straight as an arrow shaft. "You have something that belongs to us." I don't recall deciding to speak. The words found their own legs. A child fell at my creek. I gave food and fire. If he's yours, he lives because he stopped at my door. The line of riders seemed to breathe as one. The man at the front tilted his head, not impressed, not dismissive, measuring. "The desert is full of doors that close," he said. "Tonight yours was open." He raised a hand, and the drum ceased. The silence rang. Behind him, a younger warrior nudged his pony forward until he rode beside the elder. The paint across his face was the color of blood baked to brick. His eyes had the hard shine of flint. He looked at me the way a hawk looks at a rabbit that hasn't yet realized it's been seen. A footstep scuffed the floor behind me. I didn't have to turn to know the boy had woken. He edged to the doorway, small and straight, and stood with his shoulder touching the jamb. When the elder saw him, the line of his mouth softened. Only a fraction, only if you were watching for it. The young warrior's jaw flexed, like he hated that softening. The boy spoke in his language. Quick, breathless syllables, a hand to his lips, a hand toward me, then both hands pressed over the pouch. He took 2 small steps and stood between me and the riders, as if declaring himself in both directions at once. I felt something at the base of my throat I hadn't felt since the flood took my brother, a pressure that was not fear and not hope, but the ache that comes when the past and the present both insist on being heard. The elder dismounted in one fluid slide and walked to the porch steps. Up close, you could see the miles that had been woven into him. Scars like pale threads, a crease at the eye that could have been laughter once, or just too much sun. He stopped one stair below me and spoke softer. "I am Iron Elk." I nodded. "Jeb Callahan." "Callahan," he repeated, making the shape of it fit his mouth. "My son," he touched the boy's hair, "says your hand were not cruel." His gaze flicked to the rifle rack through the open door, and then back to my empty palms. "He also says your house hides no trap." "It hides coffee," I said, my voice dry. "That's the worst of it." A ripple went through the riders, amusement, or the memory of it. The younger warriors stared and thaw. Iron Elk looked past me into the cabin, where the stew pot still breathed a thin steam. Then he looked over his shoulder at the half-circle of men who had followed him across the night, like a shadow follows a flame. "Words are smoke," he said. "We will sit with fire. Bring the child. Bring yourself. We will hear and be heard. There are invitations you can refuse and live with, and invitations you refuse and do not." I turned, bent to the boy's level. He watched my face the way a foal studies a gate, nervous, ready to bolt, but trusting the hand that led him to water. I nodded once. He slipped his small fingers into mine, not so much holding on as saying, "I understand." We walked together into the moonlit yard. Riders parted. The drum started again, not fierce now but steady, an old heartbeat guiding us toward the hollow below the ridge, where a circle of stones cupped a disciplined fire. Shadows of horses sprawled long across the sand like dark rivers. I felt the weight of eyes on my back, the weight of 100 choices that had been made long before this night, and were now arriving to see how I'd shoulder them. Iron Elk gestured to a place opposite him. I sat with my knees drawn, palms on my thighs. The boy settled close enough that his shoulder warmed my hip. The younger warrior remained standing, spear planted, never quite still. Someone passed a wooden ladle. It smelled of pine and smoke. Iron Elk drank, then offered it to me. The liquid was bitter and clear as cold metal. I swallowed and gave the ladle back. "Now," Iron Elk said, and the fire snapped in a knot the way a judge taps a gavel. "Tell us what happened, and do not let fear make your story short." The circle of fire threw shadows against the canyon walls, tall and jagged, as if the very stone wanted to listen. Iron Elk's gaze pinned me where I sat. The boy pressed close to my side. Around us, warriors formed a ring, their eyes unblinking, their hands never far from bows or lances. The night air smelled of pine pitch and sweat and smoke, a mixture that clung to skin like an oath. I cleared my throat. Words are strange things. Some you spit like gravel, others you lift like prayer. That night, mine had to do both. I was mending my fence. I began, "When I saw your boy stumble through the creek bed. He was half dead. Thirst, hunger. I gave him water, food, fire. That's all there is." The younger warrior with pain across his face let out a low laugh, harsh as breaking bone. "That's all." His English was rough, bitten off at the edges. "You expect us to believe a white rancher feeds a red mesa child out of kindness? No bargain, no ransom, no scheme." He stabbed the butt of his spear into the dirt, and sparks leapt from the fire as though his doubt alone had set them loose. I met his eyes. "I expect you to believe what your boy tells you. If you trust him." Murmurs rippled through the circle. Trust, in any tongue, is a dangerous word. Iron Elk raised his hand, and silence fell like a curtain. "My son says you did not strike him," the chief said, voice calm, deliberate. "He says you gave him stew and bread. He says you tied the knot of his pouch when it was close to breaking." I nodded once. "That's the truth." The younger warrior, Stone Raven, I would later learn his name, leaned forward, eyes glinting. "Truth is not smoke from your lips. Truth is blood. If he had died under your roof, would you still call it kindness?" The fire cracked loud, like the desert itself was listening for my answer. My chest felt tight, but I held his stare. "If he had died, I would have buried him with care and carried his pouch to you. But he didn't, because I chose to open my door, not shut it." For a heartbeat, silence reigned. Then Iron Elk rose. He moved with the weight of mountains, not hurried, not weak. His hand rested on his son's head, then drifted to the pouch at the boy's chest. His fingers lingered there, feeling the knot I'd tied. "This knot," he said, lifting for all to see, "is no small thing. It holds the spirit of the bird. It holds my son's breath. And it was tightened by the hand of a man not of our blood." He let the pouch fall back against the boy's chest and turned to the circle. "So the question is not if he fed my son. The question is, why?" A dozen voices stirred, low, questioning, doubtful. Stone Raven's voice cut above them. "Because he seeks favor. Because he will use the boy's life to bargain for cattle, for horses, for safe passage. That is the way of his kind." I shook my head. "I didn't do it for trade." "Then why?" Stone Raven barked. "Why risk the wrath of 100 warriors?" I thought of flood that had taken my brother, of the helplessness that gnawed at me every night since. I thought of how my brother's last shout had been swallowed by rushing water while I stood, useless, with empty hands. Because I've buried enough children, I said softly, and I wasn't about to bury another. The words landed heavy. For the first time, Stone Raven faltered. His eyes narrowed, but the spear in his hands dipped an inch. Around the circle, the warriors murmured again, this time not in anger, but in consideration. Iron Elk studied me long, as if weighing each bone, each scar, each word. Then he spoke. Tomorrow, before the council, you will stand where the ancestors watch. You will speak again, not to me, but to the elders of Red Mesa. If your truth holds, we will know. If it fails, your blood will answer. He turned to the boy. You will sleep by the fire tonight, among your people. The child looked at me, eyes wide, torn between worlds. I gave a slight nod. He hesitated, then crossed to his father, settling among the blankets laid near the flames. Iron Elk faced me once more. Rest, Callahan. The dawn will not be gentle. I lay on the hard earth that night, staring at the cold stars. The fire snapped, voices whispered in a tongue old in the valley, and the drums had gone quiet at last. But in the silence, I heard another sound, low, distant, like a storm rolling over stone. The sound of destiny approaching, steady as hoofbeats, carrying me toward a trial I had not chosen, but could no longer escape. Dawn broke like a blade drawn from its sheath, sharp, cold, and merciless. The canyon walls blushed red as the first light spilled over them, painting every stone as if it carried its own fire. The warriors were already awake, their ponies watered and their weapons cleaned. I had barely slept a wink, lying on hard ground, listening to every crack of ember and every whisper I couldn't understand. Now, as the camp stirred with purpose, I knew the hour of judgment had come. Iron Elk stood tall at the far side of the fire pit, his son beside him, a hand resting on the boy's shoulder like an anchor. Around them, elders of the tribe gathered, men and women whose faces carried decades of sun and storm. They sat cross-legged, their backs straight despite their age, eyes steady as if they could see through the skin and into the marrow of a man's soul. Stone Raven loomed nearby, spear planted in the earth like he was staking his claim to the outcome. His face was painted fresh, red streaks crossing from cheek to temple. He hadn't slept either. His anger kept him burning hotter than any fire. Iron Elk lifted his hand, and silence settled heavy. Today we ask not only what this man did, but why. Words will be tested, truth will be measured. The spirits of our fathers listen. A hush followed, deep enough that I heard the rasp of my own breath. Then he turned to me. Speak, Jeb Callahan. Tell your story again, before the fire and before my people. I rose slowly, the stiffness in my back reminding me I wasn't as young as I once was. My hands were empty, my voice the only weapon I carried. I was fixing a fence when I saw him. I began, nodding toward the boy. He was stumbling, near collapse. He would not have lived another mile. I gave him water, food, and a place to rest. Not for trade, not for ransom, for no reason other than that he was a child in need. Stone Raven snarled. Lies dressed as virtue. A wolf does not feed a lamb unless it plans to fatten it for slaughter. Then perhaps I am no wolf. I shot back, my voice harder than I'd meant. Perhaps I'm just a man who buried one brother too many and couldn't watch another child die. The elders murmured, their dark eyes catching the firelight. Iron Elk lifted his hand again, and their whispers faded. He looked at me long, then spoke. Words are easy, but blood tells the truth. At his signal, an elder woman stepped forward, her hair white as frost, her hands steady despite her age. She carried a small blade with a bone handle. She cut the tip of the boy's finger gently, then mine. A bead of blood welled on each of us. She pressed both drops onto the leather pouch with the flaming bird emblem. Her lips moved in a chant older than any tongue I knew, words rolling like water over stone. The pouch smoked faintly, as though the leather itself remembered fire. When she finished, she lifted her head. The blood speaks. The boy's fear was real, but so was the food, the water, the blanket. The man's hands were not cruel. Murmurs rippled through the circle. Some nodded, others frowned. Stone Raven spat into the dirt. Even if his hands were not cruel, he touched what was sacred. A child of Red Mesa is not to be held by strangers. Our law demands a price. He turned, pointing his spear at me, eyes blazing. Blood for blood. The circle tensed. Warriors shifted, hands finding bows, lances, blades. The air thickened, sharp as flint struck against steel. Iron Elk's voice cut through the tension, steady, commanding. Enough! He looked from Stone Raven to the elders, then to me. There's another path. A debt can be paid not only with blood, but with service. The old ways speak of 3 roads, blood, strength, or the road itself. The white-haired elder nodded. Yes, blood already speaks. Strength could be demanded. Labor in our fields, work among our people. Or the road, becoming a bridge between our world and his. Stone Raven sneered. He is no bridge. He is a wall. Let him bleed. But Iron Elk shook his head. The spirits are watching. The child still lives because this man opened his door. To kill him now is to silence the lesson the desert sent us. He turned to me, eyes sharp, testing. So, Jeb Callahan, which road will you walk, if you mean what you say? I looked around the circle. 100 eyes, fierce and waiting. The boy's gaze clung to mine, desperate but certain, as if he already knew my answer. I'm no stranger to hard work, I said, my voice steady. But I know the land, the trails, the water holes, every cut of canyon and bend of river for miles around. If there's a road to walk, I'll walk it. I'll be the bridge. The boy exhaled, relief softening his thin shoulders. Iron Elk studied me in silence. Then, with a nod slow as the rising sun, he said, Then the road it shall be. The fire cracked, and the circle of warriors shifted. Some looked doubtful, others intrigued. Stone Raven's jaw clenched, his knuckles white on the spear shaft. But the decision was made. My life had not been taken, but it no longer belonged solely to me. The fire burned lower as dawn stretched its fingers across the canyon rim. The trial was finished, but its weight clung to me like a second skin. I had chosen the road, though I wasn't yet sure what it meant beyond the promise that I would live, for now. The elders spoke among themselves in low tones, their voices a river I could not follow. Warriors shifted, some satisfied, others restless. Stone Raven never took his eyes off me, his spear still rooted in the ground like a flag declaring war. Iron Elk approached, his steps slow, deliberate, each one echoing against the stone. He stopped before me, and his son slipped quietly to his side, clutching the pouch I had mended. The boy's eyes found mine, pleading yet steady. Iron Elk placed a hand on his shoulder and turned to me. The road is not walked in words, he said. It is walked in deeds. You will prove yourself to both worlds, or you will be crushed between them. I gave a slow nod. Tell me what I have to do. A faint smile, humorless and weary, touched his mouth. You will not have to look far. The land will test you soon enough. The words were more prophecy than instruction, and they set the hairs on my neck standing. We broke camp soon after. Warriors mounted with a discipline that spoke of years riding together as one. Iron Elk's son, Tiva, I would later learn, was lifted onto a pony, his small frame dwarfed by the saddle. He clutched the reins, looking back at me as if afraid the fire circle would swallow me whole. Iron Elk gestured for me to mount Dusty. You will ride with us to the village. The elders have spoken. They must see the man who tied the knot. I swung into the saddle, Dusty snorting, uneasy among so many strange horses. The riders closed around me, a living wall of muscle and resolve. Stone Raven rode at my left, close enough that I could hear the leather creak as his hand tightened on the spear shaft. His eyes were knives, and every so often he let them cut across me with silent fury. We rode out of the canyon and into the open plain. The sun climbed, dragging heat with it. The drums were gone now, replaced by the sound of hooves drumming the earth in unison. Dust rose behind us, a banner of smoke marking our passage. The boy rode just ahead, his small back straight, his head turning often to make sure I was still there. Hours passed. The land unrolled in waves, sagebrush, red stone cliffs, dry riverbeds etched like scars. I knew these trails. I'd ridden them chasing strays, hunting water, or sometimes just trying to outrun ghosts. Now, I rode them in the heart of a war party that could erase me with one word from their chief. By midday, we halted at a spring hidden in the folds of a canyon. Horses lowered their heads to drink, steam rising from their flanks. Warriors dismounted, stretching, talking in their own tongue. I sat by Dusty, splashing water on my face, when a shadow fell across me. Stone Raven. He crouched, his spear across his knees, his eyes burning like coal. "You think saving one boy erases the blood between us," he said in broken but sharp English. "You think tying knot makes you one of us?" I met his stare. "I don't think anything erases the past. But I'm not your enemy. Not unless you make me one." His lips curled, more snarl than smile. "The desert makes enemies without our help. When it tests you, you'll fail. And when you fail, I will be waiting to finish what the elders would not." He rose, leaving the threat hanging like a noose. I watched him walk back to the others, his shoulders rigid, his presence casting a shadow long as any canyon wall. The boy appeared then, stepping carefully across the stones, his pouch bouncing against his chest. He knelt beside me, dipping his small hands into spring and splashing water on my arm. "Tiva," he said softly, tapping his chest. Then he pointed at me, his brow furrowed, as if searching for the word. "Jeb." I blinked, surprised he knew my name, then nodded. "Jeb." His lips curved in a shy smile, and for the first time since I'd found him, I heard laughter, soft, uncertain, but alive. In that moment, something shifted. Whatever trial awaited me at Red Mesa, whatever venom Stone Raven still carried, it didn't matter. I had chosen the road, and the road had chosen me in return. When Iron Elk gave the signal, we mounted again. The sun was sliding westward, throwing long shadows across the land. Ahead, the horizon shimmered with heat, but beyond it, I could see the faint outline of mesas rising like fortresses of stone. The heart of Red Mesa waited, and with it, judgment greater than any fire circle. I adjusted in the saddle, feeling the weight of eyes on my back, the heat of the desert on my face, and the knot of the pouch tied tighter than my own resolve. The road had begun. The sun bled low as we crested the last ridge. Before us, Red Mesa Village spread across the plateau, a scatter of lodges and shelters built from hides, poles, and stone. Smoke rose in thin lines, drifting into the copper sky. Horses grazed along the edges, their coats gleaming like polished wood. Children darted between the lodges, pausing when they saw the riders return. The air shifted, laughter fading, chatter stilling, as word passed swift and silent. The chief had come home, and he had brought someone with him. I felt every eye latch onto me. Some curious, some cold, a few openly hostile. The warriors rode proud into the village, their formation never breaking. Iron Elk dismounted, his movements fluid, his authority unquestioned. The boy, Tiva, slid from his pony and ran into the arms of a woman waiting near the center lodge. She clutched him, tears streaking her cheeks, her voice breaking in prayer. Relief rippled outward, as visible as wind in tall grass. Iron Elk lifted his hand, and the murmurs quieted. He turned to me. "You will come," he said, his voice carrying. "The elders wait." Dusty snorted as I swung down, patting her neck. She didn't like the press of bodies, the smell of unfamiliar smoke. Neither did I. Warriors closed in behind me, guiding me toward the largest lodge, a structure hide stretched taut, painted with symbols of storms, suns, and great beasts. The flap was pulled aside, and I ducked into the dim interior. Inside, the air was heavy with sage smoke. The glow of the central fire threw faces into relief. 6 elders, seated in a half circle. Their hair was silver, their eyes sharp, their silence more daunting than any war cry. Iron Elk took his place beside them. Stone Raven remained standing near the entrance, arms crossed, the ever-watchful predator. One elder, her hair braided into a crown, spoke first. "Callahan," she said, her accent turning the name into something older. "You saved the chief's son. This we do not deny. But mercy can wear many masks. Tell us again, and do not let your tongue trip." So I told it, every detail. The fence post, the stumble in the creek bed, the cracked lips and pleading eyes, the stew, the bread, the knot tied in desperation to keep the pouch whole. I did not embellish. I did not strip away. I let the truth stand naked, because lies out here die quicker than truth ever could. When I finished, silence stretched. Then another elder, a man with a scar tracing from brow to chin, leaned forward. "You had no fear he belonged to us?" I shook my head. Of course I feared. A sane man would have. But I feared more what would mean to let a child die within reach of my water. A low murmur rippled through the half-circle. Stone Raven stepped forward, his voice sharp. Pretty words. But words cost no sweat. He could still be a fox in the henhouse, waiting to snatch what he wants. Iron Elk lifted his hand, silencing him. His gaze fell heavy on me. The road has been named. The question is how it will be walked. The elder woman with the braided crown nodded. Yes, 3 paths lie before him still, blood, strength, or the road between worlds. He has chosen to be a bridge. Then let him prove his feet can carry weight. She gestured to another elder, who spoke like gravel sliding. There's trouble in the valley. Horses missing. Tensions with the town to the south. We do not need another mouth that makes promises. We need eyes, hands, and will. If he is a bridge, he will show it by walking between fires without burning. Iron Elk turned back to me. Tomorrow you ride with us. There are questions of stolen horses. If you can show truth between our people and yours, the road may widen. Failing, it will close, leaving you on the wrong side. I nodded, my throat dry. I'll ride. The council ended as suddenly as it had begun. Warriors escorted me outside. The sky had deepened to purple, stars pricking through. Tiva broke free of his mother's arms and ran to me, clutching my hand with a strength that surprised me. His pouch bumped against his chest, the knot I had tied still holding. Stone Raven's eyes followed the gesture like a hawk's, his jaw set. I knew then he would never forgive me for standing where I did, no matter what the elders decreed. That night, they gave me a place near the edge of the village, close enough to be watched, far enough not to intrude. I lay awake, staring at the stars. Coyotes yipped on the ridges. Somewhere, drums thumped softly, steady as a second heartbeat. The road had taken its first step. Tomorrow, it would demand the second. The morning broke crisp, with a pale sky stretched taut over the mesas like hide on a drum. The village stirred early. Fires rekindled, smoke rising in slender columns. Children fetching water, while the women tended to pots. Warriors readied their ponies, tightening girths, checking lances and bows. The whole place moved with purpose, as if one heartbeat drove everybody. Iron Elk approached me where I stood near Dusty. His son, Tiva, clung to his father's robe, then peeked around at me, the pouch still against his chest. Iron Elk's voice was low, steady. The horses were taken in the night, 3 Mares swift and strong. Some say the town men stole them. Others say young warriors acted in anger. We will ride to find the truth. You, Callahan, will walk the road today. Eyes of both peoples must see. I adjusted Dusty's reins. If there are tracks, I'll find them. The land doesn't lie, even if men do. Stone Raven appeared at my other side, his spear already in hand. And if his eyes lie, he asked the chief. Iron Elk didn't glance at him. Then the road ends in blood. We will know. The company rode out as the sun climbed, casting long shadows across the valley floor. 20 riders in all, Iron Elk at the center, Stone Raven close at his flank. I rode near the rear, feeling eyes on me like arrows knocked but not loosed. The land unfolded ahead, dry washes, scattered sage, and the faint scars of trails pressed into earth over centuries. It wasn't long before we found the first sign. By a dry arroyo, the sand was churned, prints deep and fresh. I dismounted, crouched, and brushed my fingers over the impressions. These aren't town horses, I said. Too narrow in the hoof and no iron shoes. These are your people's. Stone Raven barked a bitter laugh. And yet they're gone. Stolen by whose hand? I studied the ground, tracing the marks. They headed south toward the flats. 3 horses, ridden hard. And here, I pointed at a shallow dent beside the hoof prints, the drag of a lance, but that means a warrior rode with them. No townsman carries a lance. The murmurs grew louder among the riders. Stone Raven's face darkened. You accuse your host now? Clever fox. Turn suspicion from your own kind. I stood slowly, meeting his glare. I don't accuse. I read the dirt. And the dirt says one of your own took them. Iron Elk dismounted, his eyes scanning the trail. He crouched where I had, his weathered hands hovering above the tracks. When he rose, he nodded once. The white man speaks true. These are the marks of our ponies and the drag of a lance. Stone Raven spat into the dust, fury seething in his eyes. Then name him. Show us the thief. I shook my head. Tracks don't carry names, but they tell us where to go. The riders followed the trail south, the prints plain in the sandy soil. Hours stretched, sun climbing higher, the land shimmering with heat. At last we came upon a narrow canyon where the tracks split and mingled with others. Hoof prints tangled like snakes in the dust. I knelt again, wiping sweat from my brow. 3 stolen horses joined by 5 more, all unshod, all warriors' mounts. Whoever took them had help. Iron Elk's jaw tightened. This is not the way of our people. To steal from within is to dishonor the lodge. Stone Raven growled. Or perhaps the white man walked ahead in the night, led them here, and now tries to blind us with false trails. I rose sharply. If I wanted your horses, they'd be halfway to Mexico by now. Look at the marks. See how deep the prints sink? They were ridden by men heavier than your hunters. This was no child's prank. This was warriors acting with purpose. The air thickened, warriors glancing at one another. Doubt cut both ways, toward me, toward their own. Iron Elk lifted his hand. Enough. We ride further. The truth will not hide forever. We pressed deeper into the canyon. The air grew still, the walls closing around us. My gut tightened. This was ambush ground. Dusty tossed her head, ears flicking. Then I heard it. Hooves, echoing ahead, shouting Comanche, harsh and urgent. The stolen horses burst into view, driven by riders with war paint streaked across their faces. Young men, barely more than boys, but their eyes burned with fire. They saw the chief, and their expressions twisted with shame and defiance. One shouted, "We took them for vengeance. The town men cut our grazing lands, and still you talk peace." Iron Elk's face hardened, grief and fury warring in his eyes. Around him, his warriors tightened the circle. Stone Raven surged forward, spear raised, seizing the moment. "You see? Our own youth shame us because you, chief, grow weak. And this man, this outsider, poisons us with his lies." The stolen horses milled, snorting, their riders torn between standing their ground and fleeing. The canyon walls trapped us all, tension drawn taut as a bowstring. And in that brittle silence, the road I had chosen narrowed to a single step. One wrong word, and blood would drench the dust. The canyon walls held the heat like a furnace, trapping every breath and every heartbeat inside. The stolen horses stamped nervously, snorting clouds into the stifling air. Their young riders bristled with paint and pride, spears clutched tight, defiance burning in their eyes. Behind me, Iron Elk's warriors had already formed a crescent, weapons half raised, waiting for the word that would loose a storm. And at the center of it all stood Iron Elk, his face carved from stone, his silence heavier than any shout. Stone Raven was the first to break it. He leveled his spear at the defiant youths, his voice cracking across the canyon. "You shame the Red Mesa. You steal from your brothers, and you spit on your chief's peace. There's only one cure for betrayal, blood." The young leader among the thieves shouted back, his voice raw with anger. "And what cure is there for cowardice? The townsmen take more each season, water, grass, land. They laugh at our restraint. We strike first or we starve. His eyes cut toward me then, a flare of hatred. And you bring a white man into our circle, as though he can speak for us? What does he know of hunger? The words lashed the canyon, striking sparks among the warriors. Murmurs grew louder, some nodding, others growling. A split was forming, jagged as the cracks in the stone above us. I felt dusty shift beneath me, uneasy at the rising storm. My own pulse hammered like the war drums I'd heard in the night. The road I had promised to walk lay right here, narrow and perilous. If I stayed silent, steel and arrows would decide the outcome. If I spoke, I risked drawing all blades toward me. I swung down from the saddle, boots hitting dust with a thud. My throat was dry, but my voice carried. I know hunger, I said, stepping forward. I've buried it. I've watched men fight over scraps. I've seen children wither because rain never came. Hunger doesn't care what color your skin is or whose land you ride. It kills all the same. The young rider sneered. Fine words, but they fill no bellies. I took another step, holding his gaze. You're right. Words don't fill stomachs. But stealing from your own? That empties more than bellies. It empties trust. Without trust, you'll starve faster than any drought can manage. The canyon went quiet, all eyes on me. Iron Elk's expression was unreadable, but he did not interrupt. Stone Raven's jaw worked furiously, anger brimming but held in check. I crouched by the tracks churned into the dust, drawing a line with my finger. These prints lead south. If you'd meant to keep the horses, you'd have hidden them in the high canyons. But you didn't. You drove them toward the flats, toward the grazing lands townsmen also claim. You weren't just stealing. You were setting bait for war. The young rider's face tightened, shame flickering beneath the paint. His comrades shifted in their saddles, doubt worming into their defiance. Iron Elk's voice finally rolled out, low and steady. Is this true? The boy's hands clenched on his reins. He hesitated, then lifted his chin in stubborn pride. We wanted to draw the townsmen out, to show them we are not afraid. Iron Elk's fury showed at last, not in shouts, but in the cold weight of his tone. And if they came with rifles instead of words, if they burned our lodges, killed our children, cut our water, you would carry that blood on your hands. The young warriors faltered, shame replacing defiance. But Stone Raven seized a moment, his voice rising. Do you see, Chief? Your softness breeds rebellion. They act because you do not. And this outsider, he jabbed his spear in my direction, puts poison in our ears with talk of bridges and roads. He weakens us. The tension twisted tight again, warriors choosing side with their eyes and stances. One sharp word would splinter the tribe. Before Iron Elk could speak, Tiva's small voice rang out from behind him. Clear, urgent. He pushed past his father, clutching the pouch at his chest, and cried words in his own tongue, fast, fierce, childlike but strong. His little hand pointed at me, then back at the young warriors, then down at the earth. I didn't understand the syllables, but the canyon seemed to. Murmurs rippled. The young riders shifted uneasily. Iron Elk's brows drew together, listening. Then he translated. His tone softened with something like astonishment. He says, This man fed me when I was dying. He tied my pouch when it was broken. If he wanted harm, I would not be standing here. He says, If we strike those who help us, then we are no better than the men who starve us. The canyon fell into silence. Even the horses stilled, ears pricked to the boy's words. Stone Raven's spear trembled in his hand, rage battling with doubt. Iron Elk looked around the circle of faces. Warriors, thieves, and one white rancher caught between. Then he said, The road is not easy, but perhaps the spirits test us through the smallest voice. The young leader bowed his head at last, shame settling heavy. The stolen horses were urged forward, returned to the chief warriors. The canyon exhaled, as if the stone itself had held its breath. But Stone Raven's eyes met mine, dark and dangerous. The battle wasn't over. It had only shifted. We returned to Red Mesa with the sun at our backs and the stolen horses trotting between the warriors, sweat still steaming off their hides. The ride was quieter than the one that had carried us out. No drums, no chatter, only the sound of hooves grinding dust. The young thieves hung their heads, bound not by rope but by shame. Tiva rode near his father, pouch tight in his grip, eyes never straying far from me. I could feel the boy's trust like a weight, and a shield that I wasn't sure I deserved. When the village came into sight, children ran forward, calling out, but they hushed when they saw the lowered faces of the young riders. Women gathered near the central lodge, their songs turning into murmurs as they read the story in the dust and sweat. The elders emerged, seated quickly as Iron Elk stepped into the circle. He did not waste words. "They stole from us," he said, his voice like a hammer on anvil. "They sought to turn our strength inward and our enemies against us. They will answer for this." The oldest elder, the woman with hair braided into a crown, studied the boys with a gaze sharp as a hawk's. "And who uncovered the truth?" Iron Elk turned slightly. "The white man, Callahan." A ripple moved through the gathered crowd. Some frowned, suspicious, others curious. Stone Raven pushed forward, seizing the moment. "Do not praise him. The truth was in the dirt for all to see. He is no seer. He is a meddler. Do you not see how quickly we grow to lean on him? Already our youth look to his tongue. Already the child speaks his name. It is a rope around our necks." His words cut through the air, and many nodded. Doubt is quick to spread in dry grass. I stepped forward, heat rising in my chest. "I didn't come here to take sides in your quarrels. I came because the boy fell into my hands, and once I carried him, the road opened whether I wanted it or not. I don't seek to lead, but I won't stand by while blood spills for nothing. If that makes me meddler, so be it." A silence fell, broken only by the restless stamping of the horses. Iron Elk studied me long, then lifted his hand. "The road is walked by steps, not by leaps. He has walked another step today." The braided elder nodded slowly. "The spirits test us through unlikely messengers. But the town to the south will soon hear rumors of stolen horses. They will not care who stole them, or why. They will see only red mesa hands. If this man claims to be a bridge, let him stand in both worlds." My stomach knotted even before Stone Raven's smile crept like a knife across his face. "Yes, let him go to the town. Let him answer their suspicion. If they spit on him, we lose nothing. If they trust him, perhaps he is useful after all. Either way, his fate proves itself." Iron Elk's gaze locked on mine. "Callahan, will you stand before your people and speak truth for ours?" I thought of the town, the sheriff's wary eyes, the whispers that painted every Comanche as a threat waiting in the dark. I thought of men with rifles who'd rather shoot first than weigh truth. My mouth was dry as desert bone. But Tiva's eyes caught mine, steady, unwavering, carrying the faith of a child who had nothing else to carry. "I'll stand," I said, the words hard but clear. The elders gave their assent with solemn nods. Iron Elk spoke again, his tone final. "Then tomorrow we ride to the town, and there the road will either open wide or close forever." That night, I sat outside my small shelter at the edge of the village, the stars sharp as broken glass overhead. I listened to the drums that thudded low and steady, carrying through the canyon. Dusty shifted restlessly beside me, picking at the sparse grass. Stone Raven walked past once, his shadow long across the firelight. He paused just long enough to whisper, low and venomous, "When the town turns its guns on you, I will not lift a hand. Remember that, white man. You chose the road. Do not beg when it swallows you." He moved on, his laughter swallowed by the night. I leaned back against a post, staring at the endless sky. The road was narrowing again, leading me toward a place where both sides might decide I was enemy. And yet, somewhere inside the weight of dread, there flickered the faint ember of purpose. If the spirits wanted me crushed between two worlds, they would have left a boy to die at my creek. No, the road wasn't leading to my end. It was leading to a test I could neither outrun nor refuse. And tomorrow, at the gates of the town, I would find out just how much one man's truth was worth. The morning carried the smell of iron and dust. I saddled Dusty with hands that felt heavier than usual, cinching the girth as though it might keep my heart from falling clean through my boots. Iron Elk rode at the head of a small party. 5 warriors, stern and silent, their faces painted in muted streaks that spoke of solemn duty rather than war. Tiva begged to ride too, but his father shook his head, pressing him into his mother's arms. The boy's eyes clung to me until we disappeared beyond the ridge. The ride south was long and quiet. Every mile closer to the town felt like a tightening noose. My mind replayed memories of the sheriff's office, of men hunched in the saloon muttering about raids and scalps, of the way fear and whiskey bred lies faster than cattle breed calves. To walk into that hornet's nest with Comanche warriors at my side was to carry a spark into a hayloft. By midday, the outline of the town shimmered against the heat, weather-beaten buildings, a church steeple, the low roofs of the saloon and general store. Dogs barked as we neared, and within moments, figures appeared in the street. Rifles were drawn before hooves even stopped. "Hold!" Sheriff Tom Morrison's voice cut sharp across the distance. He stepped into the street, revolver holstered but hand close. His gray eyes flicked from me to the warriors and back. "Jeb Callahan, what in God's name are you doing riding in with them?" I raised my hands from the reins, palms outward. "Sheriff, listen before anyone makes a mistake. The horses that went missing. We know about the damned horses." A rancher barked, leveling his rifle. "3 of mine vanished last week. Tracks led north. Who else would take 'em but them?" He spat in the dust, his eyes on Iron Elk's men. The tension coiled, tighter than a drawn bowstring. Warriors shifted, hands near their bows. Town rifles cocked in reply. One twitch, and the street would run red. I forced my voice steady. The horses were taken by hot-headed youths from Red Mesa. Yes, but not these men, not the chief, not his people. I rode with them. I saw the truth. The horses are returned. Murmurs swept to the townsfolk, disbelief mingling with suspicion. The rancher snarled. "And we're supposed to take your word for it? You've been out on that ranch too long, Callahan. Maybe you've forgotten which side you're on." Heat rose in my chest, but I kept my voice firm. "I haven't forgotten. I'm on the side that keeps graves from being dug. You think starting a war over 3 stolen horses will bring them back faster? You think bullets will plant grass on burned land?" The sheriff's eyes narrowed, studying me. He knew me, knew I wasn't a man to play at games. Still, his gaze flicked uneasily to Iron Elk. "And what do you say, Chief?" Iron Elk urged his horse forward, his presence filling the street without a weapon raised. His English rolled deep, measured. "My son was lost. This man found him, fed him, tied his spirit pouch. Now he walks between us, though the road cuts his feet. The horses are returned. The thieves are judged. If there is still blood to spill, let it be mine, not my people's." Gasps stirred the crowd. To hear a Comanche chief offer his own life shook even the most hardened rancher. Stone Raven wasn't here to twist a knife, but I could almost hear his voice daring me to fail. The sheriff lifted a hand, steadying his deputies' rifles. "If what you say is true, Jeb, then the matter rests. But know this, one more theft, one more raid, and I won't have the words to hold these men back. Do you understand?" Iron Elk inclined his head once, solemn. I turned to the townsfolk, scanning their faces. Fear, anger, doubt. But somewhere beneath, I saw cracks. Men lowering rifles a fraction. Women clutching children who stared wide-eyed at warriors they'd only known through whispered tales. "This doesn't have an end in fire," I said. "It can end in an understanding that when hunger comes, when drought burns, we find a way to share instead of steal. You can spit on me, call me fool, but I'd rather be fool than gravedigger." The silence that followed was brittle, but no shot rang out. One by one, rifles lowered. The sheriff gave a curt nod. "Get your party back to the mesa, Callahan, and pray you're right about this road you're on." As we turned to leave, I caught sight of a few men shaking their heads, whispering. Distrust wasn't dead. It never would be, but it had been delayed, if only for a day. And in this land, a single day could mean the difference between peace and ashes. We rode north again, the sun sinking low, painting the plains gold. My shoulders felt heavy, but my chest lighter, as if I'd carried something across a river, without letting it drown me. Iron Elk rode beside me, silent for a long time. At last he spoke. You stood where arrows pointed at your heart, he said. You did not fall. The road opens wider. But wider roads invite more travelers, and not all are friends. I nodded, the weight of his words settling like stone. Behind us, the town shrank into distance. Ahead, the mesas glowed red, waiting. The road was far from over. It had only just begun to show its true cost. The ride back to Red Mesa should have felt like relief. No shots fired, no blood spilled. But the farther the town slipped into the distance, the heavier my chest grew. I'd stood between rifles and bows and walked away with skin unbroken, yet I knew it hadn't been victory. Only a pause, as fragile as dew on morning grass. By the time we reached the village, the sky had deepened to indigo. Fires already burned, their smoke climbing into the stars. Children ran to greet their fathers, laughter chasing through the dust. Tiva spotted me, wriggled free from his mother's arms, and darted forward, his small feet scattering sand. He clutched my hand, grinning wide, the pouch at his chest bouncing like a heartbeat. For a moment, the fear and weight of the day melted. In his smile, I saw the reason I had chosen the road. But not all eyes were kind. Stone Raven stepped from the shadows, spear in hand, his face painted anew, crimson slashes across his cheekbones. He blocked our path, his gaze a storm. You call this peace? He spat. You rode into their town like a dog wagging its tail. They sneered, they mocked, and you came back boasting of victory. I felt Tiva's grip tighten. I squeezed his hand, then gently nudged him back toward his mother. My voice was even, though heat licked at the edges. I didn't boast. I bought us time. Time for cooler heads to see sense. Stone Raven barked a bitter laugh. Time? Every sunrise is another day they drive their cattle deeper into our grass. Another day they cut water from our streams. And while we wait, you speak of bridges. He leaned closer, his breath hot with rage. Bridges collapse when too much weight presses down. And when this one collapses, it will bury us all. Iron Elk appeared then, his presence silencing murmurs before they could swell. His eyes, deep and unreadable, passed between us. Stone Raven, he said, his tone a warning. The council chose a road. The council grows soft, Stone Raven snapped. And you with it, Chief. You let a stranger tie knots in sacred pouches. Let him speak in our circles, ride in our company. You shame the blood of our fathers. The words cut deep, and the gathered warriors shifted uneasily. Some lowered their eyes. Others nodded faintly, torn between loyalty and doubt. The air thickened, ripe for fracture. I stepped forward before the silence could rot further. If you want me gone, say it plain. But don't pretend killing me will solve your hunger. I didn't take your land. I didn't drive cattle into your streams. All I've done is keep a boy alive and tell the truth where I found it. If that makes me your enemy, then maybe your fight isn't with me, it's with the truth. A hush followed. The fire cracked like a whip. Stone Raven's jaw tightened until I thought it might shatter. His spear quivered in his grip. For a heartbeat, I braced for him to strike. Then Iron Elk raised his hand, voice steady as a mountain. Enough. The road is not a game of who shouts loudest. It is a trial. Callahan has walked 2 steps, feeding my son and speaking in the town. A 3rd step waits, whether we wish it or not. When it comes, we will see who stands and who falls. Stone Raven lowered a spear, but his eyes never left mine. In them burned a promise, not a surrender, but of reckoning. He turned sharply and stalked into the shadows, his followers trailing behind like restless wolves. The village slowly exhaled. Warriors drifted back to their fires. Mothers drew children close. Tiva pressed himself against my side, his small arms circling my waist. His voice was muffled but firm. Jeb, road. I rested a hand on his head. Yeah, kid, the road. Later, lying under the open sky, I watched the stars scatter across the black like sparks from a forge. The drums thudded distant. A heartbeat I couldn't tell was friend or foe. Iron Elk's words gnawed at me. A 3rd step waits. I knew he was right. Peace never holds without being tested. The town's suspicion still simmered. The tribe's faith was cracked. Stone Raven's fury was sharpening into a blade. The road stretched ahead, narrow, treacherous. And somewhere out there, just beyond the reach of firelight, the next test was waiting. The next trial didn't wait long. 2 days after our return from town, the wind shifted, and with it came the acrid scent of smoke. At first it was faint, a whisper threading through the sagebrush. By evening, the sky to the east had turned the color of bruised copper, and the horizon shimmered with heat that wasn't from the sun. The alarm spread fast. Children were gathered, water skins filled, and warriors mounted to scout. Iron Elk's face was grim as he stood before the council fire. "Lightning struck the dry grass," he said. "The wind carries it west. If it reaches the canyon rim, it will sweep down on both Red Mesa and the ranches beyond." The village stirred with unease. Some muttered that it was a sign, punishment from spirits angered by the presence of a white man among them. I felt those eyes cut toward me, sharp with suspicion. Stone Raven didn't hesitate to feed the flame. "Do you see?" he cried. "Since he came, the land rebels. His road leads not to peace, but to ashes. Better to cast him out now than burn with him." Murmurs swelled. Fear is easy to kindle when smoke already thickens the air. I stepped forward, voice cutting across the noise. "Listen to me. Fire doesn't care who it burns. It will swallow your lodges, your herds, and every field around the town the same. If we fight it apart, we lose. But if we fight it together, Red Mesa and the settlers, we might stand a chance." Stone Raven sneered. "You expect us to put our backs beside theirs, while they point rifles at our chests?" I held his glare. "I expect you to do what's needed to keep your people alive, same as they will. Fire doesn't ask who your enemy is." Iron Elk raised his hand, his voice heavy with authority. "Enough. The fire is the true enemy now. Callahan speaks sense. We ride to the rim. If the settlers fight with us, so be it. If not, we fight alone. But fight we must." The decision was made. The village erupted into motion. Buckets filled, wet blankets rolled, horses saddled. I threw myself into the work, helping load water skins and lash tools to saddles. Even as I worked, I felt Stone Raven's eyes burning into me, promising that if the flames didn't take me, he might. We rode hard through the night, the glow ahead growing brighter, a false dawn rising from the earth. By the time we reached the ridge, the fire was a living beast. Flames leapt 20 feet high, devouring grass and brush, snarling as the wind whipped its mane. The roar was deafening, 1,000 voices screaming at once. At the rim, we weren't alone. The settlers had come, too. Farmers, ranchers, townsmen with buckets, shovels, even wet coats stripped from their backs. For a moment, the two groups froze, warriors on one side, settlers on the other, fire between them like a wall daring us to choose. Then Iron Elk spurred his horse forward. He leapt down, grabbed a branch from a burning bush, and smothered it under a wet hide. "Here," he shouted in English, his voice carrying like thunder. "Fight the fire, or it will fight us all." The sheriff was the first to move, slamming a shovel into the dirt to carve a trench. "You heard him. Move." And just like that, the line broke. Settlers and warriors surged together, side by side, beating flames with wet blankets, hacking trenches to star the fire, dousing sparks before they leapt ahead. The air was thick with smoke, choking, stinging. My arms burned with exhaustion, my lungs screamed for air, but I kept swinging, stamping, fighting the beast. At one point I stumbled, a burning branch crashing beside me. For a split second, I saw flames curling toward my leg. Then a shadow fell, and Stone Raven was there. With a guttural shout, he smothered the fire with his spear's shaft, shoving me back to my feet. Our eyes locked, his filled with rage, yes, but also something else. Reluctant respect, maybe. Then he turned and was gone, back into the smoke. Hours blurred. Sweat poured, skin blistered, muscles tore. But when dawn came, the fire had been beaten. It smoldered in black scars across the land, but it no longer marched forward. Both sides collapsed in the ash, coughing, wheezing, faces blackened with soot. And then something remarkable happened. A settler reached for a water skin and passed it to a warrior. The warrior drank, then handed it back without hesitation. No words, No ceremony. Just necessity, and maybe the first seed of trust. Iron Elk's voice carried over the exhausted crowd. Today, the fire came to test us. It asked if we would die apart or live together. We answered. The sheriff, leaning on his shovel, gave a single nod. Reckon we did. No one cheered. There was no triumph, only survival. But survival, sometimes, is enough to plant tomorrow. As the sun rose over the scorched earth, I knew the road had widened again, not because of me alone, but because men who had been enemies swung side by side against a common foe. Yet in Stone Raven's lingering stare, I also knew this peace was fragile. Fire had united us, but once its smoke cleared, old shadows would creep back. The road had more bends ahead, and somewhere one of them would decide whether it ended in light or blood. The land still smoked 3 days after the fire was beaten back. Charred earth stretched for miles, black scars across the valley like the handwriting of some angry god. The air held the bitter tang of ash, clinging to hair and skin, seeping into lungs. People from both sides, settlers and Red Mesa, walked the scarred ground, tending to what remained. Dead cattle were dragged into pits, fences rebuilt from half-burned posts, and water carried long distances to soothe parched soil. For the first time in memory, I saw warriors and settlers working side by side. A rancher hauled buckets while a Comanche youth swung a mattock beside him. Women from town and women from Red Mesa exchanged cloth and water as if they'd always been neighbors. The fire had burned more than grass. It had burned through some of the walls men had built around themselves. But walls are stubborn things. When fear has laid the foundation, even fire can't topple them completely. I could feel the cracks already forming. I rode into town 2 days later with Iron Elk and a small escort. We carried no weapons in hand, only tools to help mend the damage. The sheriff met us on the main street, flanked by townsfolk whose eyes still flickered with suspicion. "You came when the flames rose," the sheriff said, his voice carrying for all to hear. "For that, this town owes thanks." Iron Elk inclined his head. The fire did not care for borders. Neither did we. The sheriff's mouth pressed in. He looked at me then. "Callahan, you've tied yourself to both sides. You keep saying there's a road to walk. Maybe there is. But roads can lead to ambush as easy as they lead to peace." "I know," I said, "but at least this one is being walked. That's more than we had before." The sheriff gave no reply, just a curt nod. Behind him, I heard muttering. Men grumbling that working beside Comanche was folly, that soon enough knives would be at their throats again. Fear doesn't die easy. It sleeps with one eye open. Back at Red Mesa, the mood was no lighter. The people had seen settlers fight beside them, but they'd also seen their chief stand shoulder to shoulder with outsiders. Some saw hope. Others saw weakness. Stone Raven saw betrayal. One evening, as the sun bled down the canyon walls, I found him waiting near the spring. He leaned on his spear, eyes reflecting firelight, though no flame was near. "You think you've woven us together," he said, "but what you've made is rope from dry grass. It will snap at the first pull." I didn't reach for my knife, though instinct begged me to, then helped strengthen it. I answered, "You know as well as I do we can't fight fire, hunger, and rifles all at once. The boy, your chief son, believes in this road. That should be enough." Stone Raven's laugh was low, humorless. "Children believe in rain that never comes. Belief does not make the sky open." He stepped closer, his shadow stretching across me. "One day soon you'll fail. When that happens, the people will see who you really are, and I'll be there ready." I met his stare, forcing myself not to flinch. If I fail, it won't be because I stopped trying. For a heartbeat, I thought he might strike. Then he turned sharply, vanishing into the dusk, leaving only the taste of threat in the air. That night, as drums echoed faintly through the village, I sat outside my shelter with Tiva curled against my side. The boy whispered words in his language, slow and careful, teaching me piece by piece. I repeated them back, clumsy but earnest. His laughter was quiet, but it warmed the chill out of the night. Looking at him, I realized something that steadied me. This road wasn't just mine to walk. It was his too. Someday, He would carry the story of a white rancher who fed him when he was starving, who tied the knot on his pouch. That memory might outlive the bitterness, the suspicion, even the hate. But for now, the path ahead twisted like a rattler in the brush. Peace was a fragile thread. Stone Raven was sharpening his blade, and the land, scarred and weary, whispered that another trial was waiting just beyond the bend. The moon was sharp as a sickle of night. It came to a head. The village had quieted after a day of hard labor, smoke from cooking fires drifting into the canyon air. I sat near the edge of camp, sharpening a knife more out of habit than need, when I heard the drums change. Not the steady heartbeat of ritual or the playful rhythm of dance. This beat was harder, faster, summoning. When I reached the central fire, half the tribe was already there, gathered in a wide ring. Warriors stood shoulder to shoulder, their faces painted stark in black and red. At the center stood Stone Raven, spear planted in the ground before him, his chest heaving with the force of his own conviction. His eyes found me immediately, glinting with the light of the flames. "I call challenge," he declared, his English crisp from anger. "This man, this stranger, claims the road. But the road is ours, not his. He poisons our chief with soft words. He leads our youth astray with false hope. Tonight we see his truth. Tonight we see if he can stand, or if the earth will take him back." A murmur rolled through the crowd. Iron Elk stepped forward, his presence commanding even in the fire's glow. "Stone Raven," he said, voice low but strong. "The council has spoken. Callahan walks the road." Stone Raven jabbed his spear into the dirt, sparks leaping. "The council grows weak with age. A man's worth is not measured by words around a fire. It is measured by what his hands can do, what his spirit can endure. Let him prove it, or let him die." All eyes turned to me. Tiva pushed through the crowd, his small hands gripping the pouch at his chest. He shook his head fiercely, but I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down. This was no longer about me. It was about whether the fragile bridge we had built could bear the strain of one man's hatred. I stepped into the circle. My voice carried steady, though my heart pounded like a hammer. If walking the road means facing your challenge, then so be it. But understand this. I did not come to fight your people. I came because your boy was hungry and I gave him food. If that act makes me an enemy, then the fault is not mine. Stone Raven's grin was thin and sharp. Words again. Let's see if your hands speak truer. The circle widened. Spears thumped the ground, a rhythm as old as the land. The challenge was clear. No weapon save what we carried as men, strength, will, and whatever courage we could summon. Stone Raven lunged first, fast as a striking hawk. His shoulder slammed into my chest, knocking the breath from me. I staggered but held my ground, the dust rising around us. He swung, a fist like iron cracking against my jaw. Pain burst white, but I stayed on my feet. I'd been in my share of brawls in saloons and corrals, but this was no drunken scrap. This was a trial with 100 eyes watching, judging. I ducked the next swing and drove forward, tackling him to the dirt. We rolled, dust choking, fists finding ribs, jaws, shoulders. The crowd roared with every blow. Stone Raven was younger, faster, trained for war. But I had years of grit, of wrestling cattle twice my weight, of refusing to yield when storms tore fences apart and hunger pressed close. He landed a knee in my side that lit fire in my ribs. I answered with a punch that split his lip. Blood streaked his mouth, and he grinned through it, savage and alive. We broke apart, circling, chest heaving. My legs trembled, but I stood firm. He spat red into the dirt. You fight like a man who knows he's already lost. I wiped sweat from my brow, steadied my breath. No, I fight like a man who knows he can't afford to quit. He roared and charged again. This time, I didn't meet him head on. I sidestepped, hooked his arm, and used his momentum to throw him down hard. The ground shook with the impact. For a moment, silence gripped the crowd. Stone Raven struggled, but I pinned him, one hand on his shoulder, the other raised, but not striking. I could have ended it there, driven my fist down until he yielded. Instead, I let my hand fall open, palm against his chest. "I don't want your blood," I said, loud enough for all to hear. I want your strength beside mine, not against it. If the road means anything, it means we fight the fire, the hunger, the rifles together, not tear each other apart. The silence stretched, broken only by Stone Raven's ragged breath. His eyes blazed, tore between pride and the weight of 100 witnesses. Finally, with a guttural growl, he shoved me off and rose to his knees, chest heaving. Iron Elk stepped forward, his voice solemn. The challenge is met. Callahan stands. The circle erupted, not with cheers, but with murmurs heavy with meaning. Some faces softened, others hardened, but no one could deny what they had seen. Stone Raven wiped the blood from his mouth, his glare still fierce, but beneath it burned something different. Not defeat, but recognition. Tiva ran to me, throwing his arms around my waist. His voice was small but steady. Jeb rode strong. I rested a hand on his head, my own breath still ragged. The road was strong tonight, but I knew the weight of it hadn't lessened. It had only grown. Dawn crept over the mesas with a thin wash of gold, softening the scars of the night before. My body ached from Stone Raven's fists, ribs bruised, jaw swollen, but I was alive. More than that, I had stood in the circle and not been cast out. Yet peace did not settle on me like a warm blanket. It hovered fragile, like frost that vanishes with the first touch of sun. For the next days, the village worked as if nothing had changed. Warriors hunted, women tanned hides, children played around the fires. But beneath the rhythm, I felt a shift. Some nodded to me with cautious respect. Others still watched with suspicion, muttering when I passed. Stone Raven kept his distance, his lip healing, his eyes sharp. If he had accepted the outcome, he did not show it. But neither did he strike again. Then word came from the south. A rider from town, dust covering his clothes, galloped into the valley. He brought grim news. Cattle stolen, a settler wounded by arrow. The townsfolk were roused, tempers hot as gun barrels. They blamed Red Mesa, swearing revenge. The elders gathered in the great lodge. I sat at the edge, dust still clinging to my coat. The sheriff's warning echoed in my mind. One more theft, and I won't have the words to hold him back. This will be war, one elder muttered. The town will not stop until blood is answered with blood. Iron Elk's face was heavy, lines deepened by weariness. If we fight, we lose all we built. If we do not fight, we are slaughtered anyway. Stone Raven seized a moment. He stepped forward, voice fierce. There is no road, Chief. Only two paths. Strike first or be struck. Let us ride tonight before their rifles find our lodges. The council murmured in agreement. Fear does not listen to reason. It listens to the voice that promises action. I stood, the words burning in my chest. Listen to me. I've walked this road too far to let it end in ashes. The theft may wear your colors, but I swear it wasn't your people. I know these trails. I can prove it if you give me the chance. But if you ride tonight, the town will never hear the truth. They'll only see warriors and blame every arrow for years to come. The lodge quieted, all eyes on me. Iron Elk studied me long, weighing not just my words, but the man behind them. Finally he spoke. One last step, find the truth before nightfall, or even I cannot hold back the storm. I rode out fast, Dusty's hooves tearing at the earth. Tiva slipped from the shadows to follow, and though I tried to send him back, the boy's resolve matched my own. We searched the trail south, dust rising in plumes. And there, in the sandy wash, I saw it, tracks, fresh and deep, not Comanche ponies. No narrow hooves, no lance drags. These were broad prints, iron-shod, settlers' mounts. And scattered among them, the scuffed marks of boots, clumsy, not the light tread of warriors. Rustlers, white men, hiding behind Red Mesa's shadow to spark war. We followed the trail to a ravine where the stolen cattle were penned, guarded by a ragged crew of outlaws. Rifles glinted in the sun, laughter coarse and mean. They'd planned to drive the herd south, leave settlers and tribe tearing each other apart. I whispered to Tiva, "Ride back, tell your father." But the boy shook his head fiercely, clutching his pouch. He stayed. I crept closer, Dusty quiet beneath me. A loose rock gave me away, and a rifle cracked, bullet whining past my ear. Chaos erupted. I spurred Dusty straight at them, shouting loud enough to wake the canyon. Tiva's cry carried behind me as he raced to raise the alarm. The outlaws scattered, some firing, others scrambling for their horses. Dusty barreled into the herd, spooking cattle into a frenzy. Horns and hooves turned the ravine into bedlam. I ducked low, swinging my rifle more as a club than a gun, knocking one man clear off his feet. Another lunge blade flashing, but Dusty's kick sent him sprawling. Then Red Mesa thundered in, Iron Elk at the lead, warriors fanning out like storm winds. Behind them, the sheriff and a handful of settlers followed, rifles raised against the true enemy. For once, both sides charged together. The fight was quick and brutal. Outlaws fell, some dead, others bound. Cattle bellowed, scattering into open ground. And when the dust settled, warriors and settlers stood shoulder to shoulder, breathing hard, eyes meeting across the smoke. The sheriff spat in the dirt, glaring at the captured men. These weren't Comanche. They were ours, cowards trying to spark war for profit. He looked at me then, his expression grudging but sincere. Guess your road had one more mile left in it, Jeb. Iron Elk placed a hand on my shoulder. His voice carried for all to hear. The road was not built by one man. It was walked by all who chose not to close their doors. He looked at Tiva, standing small but unshaken, and pride warmed his features. Even the smallest voice can hold back a storm. That night, the fires of Red Mesa burned bright, not in anger but in celebration. Food was shared, stories told. Settlers and warriors sat in the same circle, their laughter tentative but real. I sat with Tiva leaning against me, his pouch safe, the knot still strong. For the first time, I believed the road might not just survive, it might lead somewhere worth walking. When I finally lay down under the stars, sore and weary, I thought of my brother lost of flood, of the boy I had carried from the creek, of the fire we had fought side by side. And I understood something I hadn't before. Courage isn't the roar of battle. Sometimes it's a quiet act of feeding a hungry child, of tying a broken knot, of standing still when the world demands you take up arms. The road was long. It would never be easy. But it was open now, and I meant to walk it until the end. And that brings our story to a close. A reminder how even the smallest act of kindness can echo far beyond what we imagine. If you enjoyed this tale, don't forget to rate the story and share your thoughts below. Thank you for watching, and I hope you had a great time with this journey. Until next time, stay safe and enjoy the